Hello, good evening, viewers. This is Attorney Gehi, and today's show is live. A very important show about the changes which are going to be affected in the asylum process. The Trump administration is planning on having more changes come into the asylum process, and some of these changes are going to affect people who have re-entered the United States illegally. So, which means if someone had left the United States and if he came back illegally, he may have issues. So, according to this rule, which will be taking effect in the month of November, this rule, which will be taking effect in the month of November, it's going to be kind of very, very harsh upon a lot of people who are planning to apply for political asylum in the United States. So that is very important. And who are the people, and what is this category, and what are the changes? We are going to discuss this in detail in today's show. So according to basically the latest move by the Trump administration, the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, has proposed some changes to the asylum rules. So mainly, we already had a provision under the INA, that's under the Immigration and Nationality Act, under Section 208 of the Act, which allows us to apply for asylum. So there was a provision which was for crimes of violence, and that was already a bar. But surprisingly, the sad thing is that under the current administration, they are adding and adding and adding more and more bars to the asylum process, thereby making it very difficult for asylees to actually, apply for political asylum in the United States. So if you are considering to apply for asylum, you should consider applying for asylum before November. It may be good for you because after November, we are also seeing some sweeping changes. So what are the changes? That's what we're going to talk about in today's show. And as usual, people have asked me, so we'll be starting the show in the next 1 minute or so. So if you have any questions, you can start typing it immediately so that I can answer your questions. And, besides basically speaking about immigration, we will also be, talking about, other areas of the law. So we'll make sure that, we do the same for sure. So number one, which is very, very important, is that what is happening, the discussion will focus upon the current asylum process. We'll talk about what's going to happen in future and what's happening with the courts in terms of political asylum and what's happening with the USCIS in the adjudication of asylum matters. So let's start with the new changes under the Trump administration, which are coming into effect. So the changes are going to affect people who have criminal records. So there is going to be a bar for people who actually have serious criminal records. For example, be careful. If you're charged with a crime of domestic violence, you can have a problem even if it's a felony or if it is a misdemeanor. So that is going to be very, very important. So even if it's a felony or a misdemeanor, under the current rule, which is going to take effect in October 2020, people who have a serious felony, and if that involves domestic violence, and even if it's a misdemeanor, you can be affected by that. So that's rule number one. Second thing is, if you have entered into the United States illegally again, you may not be able to apply for political asylum. That's number two. Number three is that if you're charged with a DWI, and if that is considered to be a serious crime, then unfortunately you won't even be eligible to apply for political asylum. So these are some of the changes. And one other important change is that if you've been a member of a gang, so gang membership is going to be a disqualifying factor for people who would be applying for their political asylums. So another thing which I feel it's kind of a bolt out of the blue is that it's giving immigration officers too much leeway. They're getting too much discretion in deciding a few issues. If the immigration officer believes that this particular person may be a member of a gang or is associated with a gang, I don't know how he's going to do that, how the immigration officer is going to figure that out. But the sad reality is that you're looking at trouble and the immigration officer can deny your case. So I would say that asylum is taking a very heavy beating, and the Trump administration is literally trying to decimate the asylum process in the United States, which is incorrect because asylum has helped a lot of people, not only in the United States, from all over the world. Asylum is actually recognized under the Refugee Convention, and people apply asylum in many countries. So these are people like who fear persecution because the problem is that these are the people like who fear persecution because of the race, their religion, their membership in a social group. So take an example about someone who's a victim of domestic violence or someone who is a gay and he is living in a country that does not recognize gays and they're killed because exactly they're gays. So it's very hard upon good people who should not be allowed to apply for political asylum. So there are factors. Yes, of course, I must say that there is a small amount of abuse in every process in the world. But the bottom line is that we cannot penalize the majority and just say that everyone is bad. That's a blatant generalization, and we cannot basically do that. Of course, there has been public comment about this rule, but the sad reality is that the Attorney General has said that he is not going to listen to any criticism about the current rule. So this is something which I feel needs to change, and this is something where work needs to be done. And let us see as to how the courts are going to rule on this particular issue that is going to deal with political asylum. So what is the current state of political asylum? You should apply for asylum. I would tell people like the most important thing is when should you apply for asylum? If you fear persecution in your home country because of your race, your religion, and because of your membership in a social group, then you should apply for asylum and try to apply within the first 6 months. Because generally, when you apply within the first 6 months, you may have a lot more benefits because you can even fight the case that you have not accrued unlawful presence. That is critically important for you to make sure that you're looking at everything under a microscope. That is very important for you. It's going to help you a lot, and this may be having some long-term benefits. Besides that, it can have a long-term benefit because if you have all the papers and if you plead your case properly, the good news is that there is a possibility that your case may be granted by the USCIS officer or by the immigration judge. What is very important in the asylum process is looking at what the current administration is trying to do in November, on November 2020. What is important is to make sure that you have an unblemished record. So don't get involved with any criminal records. Don't get involved with any drug-related offenses. Don't get involved with domestic violence cases. Don't get involved with gangs. So those are the 4 things which I tell people to stay away from, and based upon what the new rule is coming. Does the new rule really mean that you will not be eligible to apply for asylum? That is not true. You can still apply for asylum, and judges are going to look at these cases. Doesn't matter what the administration wants, but at the end of the day, I definitely anticipate that there will be litigation in the courts in connection with these matters. So let's see of how the rule is going to be implemented, how judges are going to look at these rules, and let's see what in New York, what the Second Circuit is going to say, what the other circuits and other cases are going to say about the new changes, and let's see finally what the US Supreme Court is going to say about what's happening in the world of asylum. Now, since we are talking about current and breaking news, as you all rightly know, about Judge Amy Barrett has actually been, finally kind of inducted into the US Supreme Court. Firstly, heartiest congratulations to Judge Amy Barrett. And we all need to respect the fact that she's our Supreme Court judge now. And I feel that based on my readings of Judge Barrett, she's at least decent on immigration. I must give her credit for that. She looks at the picture very carefully, and I hope that she does the same once if she gets immigration cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. And she stood up for DACA recipients. So, I mean, that makes me very happy about it. So I feel that exactly, that I do understand that the balance is kind of more towards conservatism in the U.S. Supreme Court. But I'm sure that, justice will be done in the right cases. And I believe that let's see how the rulings are going to come down in future from the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So a few other important issues about political asylum, since we are seeing new changes coming up, in the current administration. So what is the best bet for people to do? Try to apply for your asylum as soon as possible. Take an example, you're on a visit visa, you're on a student visa, or if you've been a victim of domestic violence right now, apply for it as soon as possible. And yes, I mean, there are ways to fight cases, and you have the right to fight those cases. And ultimately, it's for the judge to decide whether they have to grant your case or they have to deny your case. But the sooner, the better. Why? Because when you apply within the 1-year deadline, the good thing is that you don't have to show exceptional circumstances. So under 208 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, you can generally say that, exceptional circumstances do not apply and you are actually eligible for asylum. And the judge is going to see whether you are a credible witness. A credible witness generally means a witness whom the judge needs to believe. In layman's terms, basically, a credible witness is a witness that the judge says, yes, I think his story is true, and I think I need to give him some consideration. So that's the first part of the test that's generally kind of considered when you go to the court or when you're before the USCIS officer. Then the second part of the test is critically important to show that whether you will definitely, fear persecution in your country, in your home country, because of your race, your religion, and because of your membership in a social group. So it's religion, membership in a social group, or because of your political opinion. So then the officer makes a decision. But sometimes what happens is that when the documentation of the case is not very good, then immigration officers tend to deny these cases. Judges do not look upon those cases very favorably, and they say that, well, you did not basically hit the nail on the head. You failed to show a nexus between your fear of persecution. You did not give me enough evidence, and those are factors that can result in the denial of your asylum application. Now, how does the process work? Generally, there are two types of asylum applications. One is an affirmative asylum application. What is an affirmative asylum application? An affirmative asylum application is an application wherein you are applying for asylum, which means like you are just filing your papers to apply for political asylum. A defensive asylum application is that when you get picked up by ICE or you get thrown into remote proceedings, which means you get a letter to come before an immigration judge. And when you are applying for that application before the immigration court, that is known as a defensive asylum application. The burden of proof is the same, even if you apply for an affirmative asylum application or when you apply for a defensive asylum application. So the burden of proof is the same in both the cases. I wouldn't say, yes, the burden of proof is the same in both the cases. So when you are before an immigration judge, be ready. Then what happens? First, your case goes before an immigration officer when it's an asylum application that's affirmative in nature. And if you get granted, well and good, great news. You don't have to worry about anything. And thereafter, after 1 year, you can apply for your green card if you get granted. That's about an affirmative application. Now, what happens when it gets denied? Then you're going to be sent before an immigration judge. So you have a second bite of the apple and try to work very hard. And you need to make sure that you go with a very experienced attorney down there and fight your case. And it may be granted or it may be denied. If it gets granted, well and great. Again, your asylum is granted. You should be happy. And if that gets denied, then what you can do is you can still apply for an appeal before the Board of Immigration Appeals. And if the Board of Immigration Appeals grants your application, fantastic. Now, the most common question I get is that, Mr. Gehi, what happens when the Board of Immigration Appeals denies my application? Then after that, you have just, generally, I would say, generally in most cases, you have one more shot, which means you have one more chance that you can, file an appeal before the circuit court. And if you're living in the state of New York, you can apply for an appeal before the Second Circuit. And generally, if the circuit grants your case, you're lucky. But what happens now that you had applied for asylum now, and your asylum was denied? You applied for political asylum, and your asylum is denied by the immigration judge. The Board of Immigration Appeals, which is considered to be the highest authority, in the immigration system, that entity has denied your case, and you have a deportation order. Is there hope? My answer is you may still have hope. If you are sponsored by your family members, by your mother, or by your father, or by your spouse. So if you were sponsored by them, by your mother, your father, or by your spouse, you may still have hope, because you should either consider, reopening that case, and you should try. There's no guarantee, but they may reopen the case. But there's something else that you can do in this case. What you can do is you can apply for the Professional Waiver. So under the Professional Waiver program, the good news for you is that you applied, your I-130 becomes current. Then after it becomes current, then you begin with the National Visa Center processing. And after the NVC processing is done, so then what you can do is, after the National Visa processing is done, then you need to apply for the Professional Waiver as well as the Waiver of Deportability. It's a big job. It's a complicated job. And experience matters a lot when you're applying for those waivers. A lot. So make sure that gets approved. And then if that gets approved, good news for you. You may just have to step out of the country, just to get your passport stamped, and you can be back into the country. So there's nothing to worry, but you should have someone sponsor you at least. So if you are in that situation wherein your asylum was denied, and if you have an outstanding order of deportation, doesn't mean that exactly, there's no hope in your case. There may be light at the end of the tunnel. And we are going to open the floor now. People have asked me to remind them, yes, this is a live show. So we will be taking your questions now, because your time for questions is from 6:45 to 7 p.m. And this is a live show. I'm live right now, and it's a Wednesday, and I'm going to take your questions right now. So let's look at the first question for the day. So David Egan from Facebook. I'm a professor from Canada who's teaching in a non-accredited college in Alaska. I'm having issues with visa because it is not accredited. What are my options? So firstly, Professor Egan, depends on what kind of visa do you have right now in the country. If you're on a TN visa, or if I don't know much about the visa on which you are in, if the college is not accredited, and if you are legal, then I don't see that to be a problem for you. If you're on a TN visa, if you're on an O visa, if you're on basically an H-1B, I don't know that. But still, the college can sponsor you if you're doing your job. And if you're a professor there, and if you're legal, you can still apply for a green card there, or make sure that they sponsor you. So as far as it is a bona fide institution, and if you have a proper visa to work in that particular college, then I think you should not have any issues applying for your green card through that college or extending your visa. So this is my actual answer to David Egan, Professor David Egan. So if you have any questions, you can email us, and I'd be happy to look further into your matter at info@gehilaw.com. So I think there's an issue here. All right, so the next question is from Omar. Dabur from Facebook. How can those on asylum waiting receive medical attention for serious matters? So if you are if you have a political asylum pending, so the good news is that you don't have to worry about the public charge issue. So if you have a medical issue, you're allowed. So if you have a medical attention and if it's a serious issue, if you cannot help it, you will have to seek the medical benefits, and that's an exception to the public charge rule. So you are good, Omar Dabur. So I would kind of basically say that take it because you don't have a choice at this stage. So we'll take it from there. So Sunil Patel, I'm a British citizen. I need non-immigrant visa to visit the US in 2008. I got a 212A6C1. Is it possible for you to send me a waiver? Yes, there is a possibility that you can apply for a waiver, Sunil. And if you could send me an email at info@gehi.com. So we need to apply for a waiver. And if the waiver gets approved, then the good news for you is that exactly you'll be allowed to visit the United States. So Sunil, you can email us and we'll be happy to discuss further, or you can also WhatsApp us. So that's my answer to Sunil's question. But if you have any more questions, this is a live show. So you can actually start emailing us. I would say like chatting with us with a lot more questions on this particular show. So this is your time for question and answers. And last time a viewer said, Mr. Gehi, please let us know that, what is the time to ask questions. Now is the time for you to ask questions. So if any further questions, you can type them. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions and make sure that, we take things further. Now, another issue which I get about political asylums is that when can you apply for a work permit in a political asylum matter? So take an example that you came here today and you applied after 2 months from now. So you have to wait from the date of your notice that you get, you have to wait for 150 days. Then after that, you can apply for political asylum or for your work permit. So once if you apply for a work permit, then it takes 3-4 months for you to get it. Then once if you get your work permit, you can work in any kind of business. So someone asked me, is there a particular occupation I need to work in? The answer is no. So that restriction does not apply to political asylum cases. So there are people who get the work permit, they work in factories, they work in companies, and of course that you won't be allowed to work for the US government or institutions that require US citizenship. But generally, you can work at most of the places. You can have your own business. You can drive an Uber. You can basically be a cab driver. You can do anything once you have the work permit in that regard. And later on, what happens after they get the work permit is that you'll be scheduled for an interview. And at that interview, if you pass, well and good, you should be happy and you should be fine. So Nikhil Graham, what is the biggest impact COVID has had on immigration? So Nigel, the biggest impact that COVID has had is that a lot of people from different countries are not traveling into the United States. Travel for Americans has become difficult to different countries. Businesses have started suffering because, for example, the travel industry, it's kind of getting nowhere in the United States. So that's one of the biggest issues that we're having right now. And, we all need to realize that the world is a global village. And even if you like it or not, gone are the days that one country can just survive on its own. It's impossible because the world is dependent upon imports and exports. So end of the day, imports have suffered, exports have suffered. And because of the current administration, there are too many bans on immigration. Even people who are green card holders, they are stuck abroad. Even people who went for the H-1B stamping, they are stuck abroad. And these are legal people. And, and I'm sorry to say that the administration has used COVID as a sword. COVID has been used as a sword against the immigrant and non-immigrant visa categories. So that is what has happened after COVID. Is there any silver lining that came out for immigrants after COVID? My answer is no. Laws only became worse for immigrants. And, I'm an immigrant myself. And, I pay my taxes. I have around 30 or 40 people working, 35 people working for me totally. So end of the day, with good immigrants, the economy does benefit. And there are numerous articles written on this. And history is the biggest witness to everything. The US is a country that has been built by immigrants. the native Indians were the actual owners of the United States of America, and everyone else after that was actually an immigrant. So even Alexander Hamilton, for history buffs, was an immigrant in the United States. So Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State of the United States, was a foreigner, came to the United States and became the Secretary of State of the United States. So that's my answer to Nigel Graham. But thank you, Nigel. Fantastic question. My big thank yous to a few people who are on the show today. Of course, I need to thank Daniel Leivik, and I need to thank Yogesh for being a very important part of our show. Then I need to thank David Ian for the great question. Omar Tabur, thank you for your question. Gretchen Heidler, that's basically thank you for your question, and Sunil Patel for your question. And thank you to Nigel too. And now let's see what Brandy has to say. How can I sponsor myself in the US? I'm from Ireland. I have a little education and no job. So the first thing is, Brandy, what you need to do is that if you're a businessman and if you're legal in the United States, if you're in legal status, then there may be a way out. You can get in touch with me via email, and I may be able to just, recommend you some options. You may find an employer who may be interested in your skills, because even if you don't have a lot of education, if you're a skilled worker, if you find an employer, you may be able to kind of sponsor yourself for a green card through that employer. You have to just stay legal. And the second thing is that you can get married to a US citizen. That's the second way to do it. And the third way is that if you are a member of the e-visa countries, the investor visa countries, then Brandy, you may have hope. The next question is from Sunil Patel. How much will it roughly cost to get the waiver? So Sunil, it would be great if you could, go on my website and if you could WhatsApp me from there, or if you could just email us, or, could WhatsApp the law firm, I would say. Or if you could email us at info@gaylaw.com, then we can discuss further about, what we can do for you. So that's my answer to Sonal's questions. So if there are any more questions, feel free to ask them. So, so we can answer questions for our viewers. So we were talking about asylum now. And after that, what happens after you get your work permit? Now, after you get your work permit, then you'll be waiting for an interview before the judge. That's generally the case. But someone asked me an interesting question, said, Mr. Gehi, like I came in and I applied for political asylum, and I came in with a visa to this country. While the asylum case is in progress, even if you have the case before the immigration judge, while the case is in progress, even during that time, if you get married to an American citizen, you may still be able to close the entire case, of course, with the permission of the judge, administratively close the case and qualify for a green card. So things change because sometimes people get married and things happen, and that can be a blessing. Are you allowed to change your lawyer? It is your legal right to change your lawyer at any time. Do you have to inform the lawyer that you're changing your lawyer? That was the next question. The answer is no. Anybody can change the lawyer at any point of time as per to their wish. Can an immigration lawyer from New York handle a case from all over the US? The answer is yes. The good thing is that you're allowed to appear before the administrative authority, that includes the Board of Immigration Appeals. You're allowed to appear before the immigration judge and before the immigration officer all over the country. So even if you're abroad and if you want to file for immigration, any lawyer from the US can help you to handle your immigration matter. So those are some of the questions which I got. And if you have any other questions, yeah, please type your question as the next thing. So if there's any other question, this is live show. Just want to make it clear because some people were confused. So every Wednesday we have this kind of live show when we do take, and it doesn't have to be about this. It can be about everything. So it can be about some other immigration areas too. And also, if you're considering law school, if you have a question that relates to politics, would love to basically answer them. And it's always fun interacting with wonderful viewers over here. And I must thank each one of you, for basically spending your time with us, getting your questions answered. Now, please remember, on a different note about H-1B visas, you're going to see a lot of requests for evidences. Make sure that you answer them properly. Fight them hard, because immigration. So it's the best way to actually do it is info@gehi.com would be the best way to get it rather than that. Yeah, so now, Kaisim Casello, do you help with K1 Fiance Visa? Yes, we do. And you can email us. We can look into this and we'll be happy to help you, Kaisim. And Casello, first, thank you for joining the show. And yes, of course, we do handle fiance visas from all over the United States and the world. So if what is about the fiance visa, make sure that you have the right documentation. Make sure you're very careful about what you submit. Make sure that the testimony that your spouse or your fiance, I would say, is about to give, my apologies, your fiance would be giving before the consulate is very solid, it's very credible, and it makes the officer believe that the testimony is correct and there are no gaps in the testimony. So those are important things about a fiance visa that someone needs to know about. So that's the law of fiance visas. And what happens when a fiance visa gets denied? It just makes things a little more difficult. So better do it right, do it properly for the first time. So if there's any other question, we have 1 more minute. Let me see whether anyone else who wants to ask their last and final question before we end the show. And you please like our show on Facebook. Feel free to kind of share it. We'd greatly appreciate that. And once again, my thank yous to Dan Lewick, as well as to Yogesh, as well as to Omar, and to Gretchen Hyder. Who built the cages, Obama or Trump? I would say, like, everyone has built cages in America. That's the best way to put it. So exactly, like, I just need someone who can understand the humanitarian aspect of basically the administration. So I would say, like, the current administration has taken things to a very, very different level. So even if you looked at, Joe Biden, he said that I'm sorry that things happened in the past. But at the end of the day, he also said that he is not going to support these moves. But on the other hand, if you look at Trump, he's saying that he's going to have a very, very restrictive immigration policy for legal immigrants too. So that's about it, really. Sunil Patel, as I said, thank you again for your question. And feel free to email us at info@gehilaw.com. And I'd be more than happy to get in touch with you. Nigel, thank you so much. I did appreciate your question about COVID. Yes, there has been an impact. Families have been separated because of COVID, as I mentioned. And Sunil, as I mentioned, feel free to be in touch with us by emailing us at info@gehilaw.com. Kasim, yes, you can email us at info@gehilaw.com, and that would be better. And thank you so much for watching the show. The information in the show is general in nature and does not apply to any specific facts or circumstances unless and until a written agreement is entered into between the parties and attorney-client agreement is entered, between the parties. And thank you so much for watching. And this is an attorney advertisement under the laws of the state of New York. We handle immigration cases from all over the United States and the world, and we can be reached at 718-263-5999. And if you want to email us, our email is info@gehilaw.com, or you can visit info@gehilaw.com, or you can visit us at www.gehilaw.com. Thank you. We'll be back again next week, same time, same place, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Keep watching Green Card at Gehi, and don't forget to share the video and like us. Thank you again.